where you must fight to survive. One webinar broke all the rules. When the worlds of marketing and billing collide in the midst of a global pandemic, two leaders will reunite your data like never before. From the Director of Webinar and Webinar 2 comes the virtual event the New York Times called Not Something We Reviewed. If you attend only one webinar this year, make it this one.
I love it when a plan comes together.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad you could join us today. Welcome to the webinar, Synergize Your Marketing and Billing, How Sharing Data Maximizes Your Tactical and Strategic Advantages. My name is Angie Fiedler-Sutton, and I'm with the Behavioral Health Association of Providers. Behavioral Health Association Providers, BHAP, is a national trade membership association that provides education and advocacy for behavioral health care providers and related entities. Formerly known as the American Addiction Treatment Association, BHAP is the leading and unifying voice of addiction-focused treatment programs. We provide membership benefits such as networking and access to compliance information, educational opportunities such as this webinar and our Certificate in Addiction Treatment Marketing, the CATM, and advocacy efforts to keep those in the industry aware of new laws and regulations that may be coming that will affect them. Being ethical in the marketing of your addiction treatment program, organization, or services is more important than ever. The CATM is a first-of-a-kind certificate program that teaches you best practices and practical tips from renowned legal and industry experts. It's 6 courses, all available online, and can be taken in any order. For more information about BHAP or our CATM, you can visit our website at www.bhap.us. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. A graduate of Villanova University School of Business and current CEO of Dreamscape Marketing, Dan Gemp applies financial modeling to business intelligence campaigns to advise clients on a cost per action marketing model. Gemp maintains consultative focus on extremely efficient and proprietary SEO techniques focused on ROI. A nationally recognized speaker on ethical healthcare marketing, Dan maintains a year-round speaking schedule, forecasting digital marketing trends and delivering the strategies to capitalize on them. His unique perspective at the intersection of business, digital marketing, and healthcare has positioned him as a thought leader and go-to contributor to many healthcare podcasts, webinars, and publications, including Bloomberg and the New York Times. Dreamscape Marketing, who is an associate member of BHAP, also provided our organization with a white paper that gives you key 2020-2021 metrics for marketing. It's available on our website for anyone. Greg Keilin is the co-founder and CEO of Prosperity. Greg has 10 years of experience in finance, corporate strategy, and operations. He's assisted in the evaluation, execution, and integration of multiple behavioral health M&A transactions. He also has analyzed and implemented plans for data-driven revenue cycle revamp in response to changes in payer behavior. Prosperity is also an associate member of BHAP, and they've offered a free financial health check worth $5,000 to our members. More information is on their section of the BHAP website. Dan and Greg, thank you for taking the time to present today. With that, I will hand the webinar over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us, and big shout out to BHAP. It's a rapidly growing organization in behavioral health, and they're doing a lot of thought leadership work, legislative work. We continue to be impressed. So well, I've always been told my face was made for radio. Very happy to be here today, and hopefully you guys liked our extremely cheesy promotional video. Greg and I put a lot of work into that. We're trying to throw the buzzwords at you. We're trying to say synergy today. We're going to prognosticate. We're going to try to let you know what's coming and where your data sources are going to be able to effectively be merged, right? When your marketing talks to your billing, right? How does sharing this data maximize your tactical and strategic advantages? So what we're really going to dive into, the origin story, I think, is important for you all to know of this topic. Greg and I continuously get introduced to each other by clients that we've both been working with for several years, and neither one of us knew that the other one was even a vendor or partner. And what's been happening is if we were given access to certain sets of data, highest paying policies or the geographic regions that have been generating the most inbound, patients and phone calls through a website, for example, if those data sources were shared back and forth, both of us could do our jobs better, and your organization would be able to automate more, be more cost effective with your marketing dollars, be more cost effective with your dollars on actual collections and accounts receivable. And so we're going to take you through some specifics today and things that we've observed in this relationship of working together and in the scenarios where we haven't yet been given access to that data. So realize, the premise here is that your marketing and billing seem unrelated, right? One seems like a front end operational, sales and marketing need, and the other end looks like back office, right? Like, oh, billing, that just happens at the end and they'll figure out how to get us paid. But really, we hold the keys to success for each other, right? The more data Greg has on where we're targeting, whether it's in-state, out-of-state, in-network, out-of-network, and the more he's able to provide data back to us and say, hey, look, these are the best paying policies, these are the best fit for treatment kind of patients, that's going to allow you to strategically connect front-end and back-end data. It's going to make you more efficient. It's going to deliver optimized solutions. And I'm not saying optimized as a generic term, right? You will spend less dollars and make more dollars, regardless of whether you're a private psych practice, a huge residential multi-location substance abuse center. If you connect these two streams of data, you will gain efficiency rapidly.
Right, and I think that's a really important sort of point to just emphasize, Dan, is that we're not talking about sort of abstract, difficult to quantify, intangible benefits. Ultimately, the result of the type of collaboration that we've been able to do in certain cases, and that we would, want to encourage people to seek out for their billing and marketing teams more frequently, the end result of that for your organization is increased revenue and improved profitability. I mean, it's lower cost and more revenue. So there's a very tangible, measurable impact of these of this activity that we're talking about.
Yes, and I think that there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace about why would we talk to each other, right? What really can we discuss? And that's what we're going to dive into today. There is a whole lot that, whether it's internal, external, that your billing resources should be doing with your marketing resources. So if it seems like a disconnect, it's a good thing you're here. So clients are often asking, right, marketing and billing, the same questions. So I get a phone call in the morning, ring, ring, ring. Hey, what are you guys doing in my targeting and in my marketing efforts to get me more of those out-of-network Aetna patients? And then later in the day, they're calling Greg and saying, hey, it really looks like we're making the most money off of those out-of-network Aetna patients. Are we getting paid well on those? Are we getting paid on time on those? And so we're getting the same questions often in the same day. And then the irony is we actually consult each other, right? To get the answer to that question for my marketing client, I call Greg. And then to confirm the scalability of certain insurance policies or market opportunities, Greg calls me. So I want you all to realize that you might think that's uncommon, or you might have even done that before, but this is happening to us more and more frequently. Anything to add to that, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that, it's ultimately, I'm a sort of big picture financial guy at heart, right? And so goes back to the comment that I just made, that ultimately what we're trying to do is increase your revenue and improve your profitability. And so from my point of view, the way I always think about this is, ultimately there are two parts to the equation. And what we're going to get into in the next couple of slides is talking in more detail about how this works. But ultimately, our job as the billing company is to take the inputs from the front end and process those, right? So we're receiving census, we're receiving policies, we're receiving, inbound inquiries for our VOB team. And then what we do is we process those things and we turn those things into cash, right? But as a sort of the big picture financial guy, what I'm interested in obviously is maximizing the cash, but not just that, right? Like I also want to help our clients understand their business model and optimize their business model. And that often takes the form of, talking about whether or not and when and with whom to go in network, or it might take the form of exactly what Dan was describing. How do we more efficiently target our marketing efforts? And these are things that they're not strictly billing questions in the sense of, is this the right CPT code on this claim for this payer? Did the claim get rejected by the, clearinghouse? What's the status of this appeal? They're not strictly billing questions, and they're not strictly marketing questions in the sense that they're not questions about what is our call volume this week, or what's our conversion rate from this, that, and the other thing. But ultimately, the only way to make business decisions and optimize the business plan and the financial performance of the business is going to depend on the data and the insight that comes from both of those teams, and bringing those those two pieces together into, I like the puzzle analogy, the visual metaphor that we had on the last slide of the puzzle pieces. I think it's really accurate. I think it really is. They each piece stands on its own, and they have these points of connectivity. They fit together in a really important way that makes the whole greater than the sum of the parts.
It's something I've noticed as the efficiency thing, as we're going to get further into this, but a lot of the initial work that connects us and our billing partners, right? Like internally, right? We might have a client where we're getting them multiple inquiries in a day, phone calls, live chats, contact forms, and there's no feedback loop to tell us the quality of those inquiries. And so we might think our marketing campaign is delivering huge volumes of qualified leads, and it's delivering a couple, but largely they're unqualified, right? It's extremely valuable on the front end to know, right? Regardless of what software, people, outsourced, insourced, whatever you're using for VOBs, if you can verify those benefits quickly, right? Which is typically the starting point of where, us and Prosperity would work on an account, right? If we're generating a lead through your own website and it's being run in 30 to 60 minutes, like clockwork, 24/7, right? That is going to get you the data much, much, much faster than if it's taking you, you get a lead at 4 p.m. and nobody's even calling them until the next morning, and you're not really getting VOB done until later in that second day. You've already lost that patient, but they might have been an exceptionally qualified lead, and we wouldn't have the intel we need to try to target more patients of that exact type. So we might ignore it thinking it was a bad lead and you didn't close it, but it's really because you took too long on VOBs. And that's the start of the inefficiencies, but go ahead, Greg.
Well, I was going to say that then there's even a whole nother layer of, again, when we talk about integrating the data, right? Getting the VOB back, getting it timely, getting it accurate, getting it complete, that's super important. But even more than that, when we can start to tell Dan and his team in the admissions office, not only does this policy, it's active, it has appropriate coverage, the deductible is good, but also based on our payer data and our historical reimbursements, is going to give you this kind of revenue. And this is how fast that revenue is going to turn around into cash. This is how fast that payer typically pays. That's even more valuable information for Dan and for the admissions team to be able to say, yeah, this is a great lead. We want more like this. Or on the other hand, you know what? This is not a great lead. This channel is not really performing for us, maybe producing a lot of calls, but that's not going to turn into a bunch of revenue. So we should allocate our efforts elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to say real quick, we've got the polls are actually leading up to something. So anyone that you might be on a tablet or a mobile device, you'll need to swipe on your screen to see the actual polling questions. But please give us your 2 cents on those. We're not just trying to be funny. We're going somewhere with that. So here's the questions we're getting asked all the time. Who is my best payer, right? I get presented with that question as, Dan, can you go get me more of these? And it might describe a certain type of employee at a the local Boeing plant that has really good insurance, right? How do I get more Boeing employees, or how do I get more college students from this one campus that we're near, right? And then also I like this insurer the best because in Florida, Blue Cross doesn't pay as much if I'm in network. So what ends up happening is when I get asked those questions, I immediately change it over to an operating question and I call my billing partners. So really these exact same questions are being asked to me on the front end, like, how do I get more of these things? But the answers are coming from Greg, whether I'm the one saying it or not. So talk about your approach there, Greg.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a very, very common question that we get is, who is my best payer, right? Like people want to know who are the cash cows, and especially in an out-of-network context, ultimately the revenue cycle game is a numbers game. It's a game of averages. So you're going to have, at every facility, you're going to have some patients who pay super well, and you're going to have some patients who pay much less. And the goal is to sort of come out with an average that's going to make your business plan effective. And so everybody wants to know, who are those top tier payers? Who are the patients that I'm getting that I'm really, really making great revenue from? So I can go after those, so I can get more of those, right? And so from my point of view, that's a very easy question for us to answer, the first part of it, right? We can tell you Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, United, GEHA, whoever, this home plan, that home plan, we can tell you, over the last 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, who has been paying you well. And who's been paying you less well. So we can tell you who your attractive payers are. But this is something that my business partner, Aaron, always likes to say, is that, these key performance metrics, like exactly like this, what is Blue Cross paying me? What is Aetna paying me? These key performance metrics are great, but they're not very useful unless you take them and you do something with them. And so we can tell you who your best payer is, but then it's Dan's team that's then going to have to take that information and do something with it that's going to make a difference to your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the key consideration there, right, is this feedback loop. We provide data through VOB to the billing side of the house, and the billing side of the house tells us the preferred policies and patient types, even down to demographic information, so that we can refine our marketing efforts and our targeting.
Right, absolutely. And that's just one other, the demographic information is a really important piece there, Dan, right? Like you mentioned employers before, this is something that folks may or may not know about insurance plans, but even within the same payer, if you look at two different Aetna policies, they might pay totally differently. And the reason for that has to do with the plan design of those specific plans. Aetna is not one monolithic company that does everything the same way. Boeing and General Motors might both have Aetna insurance, but they've paid for different Aetna products. And so those might pay differently as a result. And so, again, from our point of view, from the billing point of view, we get the policy number, we get the claim information, but we're not looking at the employer, for example. We're not looking at some of those demographic information that might really make a difference to how you're going to access more of those attractive payers. And that is sort of a good segue, I think, to our next topic, which is, in network and out of network. This is another question that Dan and I both get asked all the time. From my perspective, very often the question comes to me in the form of, hey, I've heard that investors are willing to pay a higher multiple for in-network businesses, or I've heard that you get referrals from insurance companies if I go in network. So can I, is that something that we should do? Or some people just sort of think, well, hey, there's a club, I want to be a member of that club, right? Like I want to be in network with the big payers because it means something. It's psychological. And our advice about that always starts with the billing side, right? It always starts, because that's where, what we know. Our advice about that always starts with, okay, you are thinking about going in network with Cigna. All right, well, let's start by looking at what kind of rates are you getting from your out of network Cignas, and what type of rates have we seen in your region for your services from Cigna for in-network contracts. And then we can start to ask the question, okay, is the in-network rate competitive? Is it a little bit lower? If it's a little bit lower, then the question is, okay, what's the value proposition of accepting a lower rate in exchange for what? What benefit do you get in exchange for accepting a lower rate? And this is where the billing data, the billing part of the equation sort of ends and the marketing side begins, because ultimately the big benefit of going in network is that you're going to get a lot more admissions. You're going to get a lot more referrals. And it's the information in order to understand that part that we need to get Dan's input on. Yeah,
and I'll clarify, those exact same questions have different implications for us, right? On the marketing side, it's not more is more, right? And with digital marketing, ranking higher is better, right? You'd rather get all the phone calls and have to filter through them yourself, but you can target exceptionally accurately using digital marketing, right? You can use specific keywords for insurance payers, for employers, for employee types, right? Very few people are typing in luxury rehab center. Wealthier people just have really, really good insurance, and they're using keywords like private, right? So you might think you want these high dollar out of network policies, but there are very few of them. And your cost to acquire a patient with that exact policy that you love, right, might be so high, right? I can give the cost per acquisition data to your billing side of the house, right? Hey, yeah, we're getting these 3 amazing policies every month and the client wants 4, but it's like a $7,000 CPA. How much money are they actually getting paid on that? Oh, they're trying to get paid 35, but they're actually getting 27. Oh, so it's costing 7 grand. They're only getting paid 27. There's only a 20 grand spread on that minus cost of services, right? That is where your data becomes granular and useful. You might be pursuing a high dollar target that has less margin on it than going in network, getting 4 admissions that pay half as much money, but your cost per admission is 20% as much, right? You're getting a $1,500 CPA instead of 7,000. Your margin ends up being the same, but you're getting 4 times the volume. So we assess total call volume, but we want to know from the VOB data, what's the quality on those inquiries, right? How many of them are ready for treatment and qualified to pay? And then on the conversion rates, would you rather get 1,000 phone calls, which I'm always asked all the time, how do I get 1,000 more phone calls? Well, how many admissions are you trying to get from that and what type in dollars, please, right? Oh, I'd like to get about 10 more out of network admissions. Well, what if I just get you 10 phone calls and every single one of them is an admission, right? Isn't that the most efficient use of your marketing dollars, your admissions resources, and confirming what that targeting is with your billing side of the house? So the ability to flex those things, you can test all of this on the front end with marketing. You might have a question for Greg, what's my best insurance payer, right? And this month there's an answer. But next month we can try to get you more patients from a different insurance carrier, right? And see if it's a better payer. You can A/B test these things. There's a multivariate approach here. So as you're evaluating your business model itself, on the marketing side, you can test things to acquire data, and we would confirm the quality of those efforts through VOBs, right, and sharing that front end data, and whether or not you're making more or less money through the billing. But very, very, very few of our clients let us have conversations about their billing data. They don't want their Mad Men ad agency talking to their accountants, right? I don't want you to know how much money you actually made me. Well, guess what? We already generally know it's okay to have transparency with your trusted partners or with your own employees. So I think that's where a lot of owner operators balk at this concept of letting your billing talk to your marketing. The irony is, right, these conversations are happening anyway. We just don't know what client we're talking about, right? And this is important because Greg is tied by a lot of the same contracts we are. We always have NDAs in place. A lot of the times there's some exclusivity in certain channels, and a lot of the times we have BA agreements in place. And so there are limitations. We might be talking to each other about the exact same client on the exact same day, but neither one of us can say who it is, what state they're in, whether they're in network or out of network. And so we're speaking in vagaries. And then 2 years later, we found out, in fact, it was the same client, and we should have just asked for permission to speak to each other.
Right. We share a lot of good information about the marketplace. And that's what, Dan, you're exactly right. That, I know enough about your business to be dangerous, and you know enough about my business to be dangerous. So it's not as if Dan, isn't aware, for example, approximately what policies are paying what in what states and things like that, because in order to do his job effectively, he has to know that. And the more specifically he can know that, the better he'll be able to do his job.
And I don't think many marketers consider this. That's the other thing. People that are coming in from outside the industry, they don't realize that the value of 2 different patients can be different by like tens of thousands of dollars, right? 2 people of the exact same type with the same field of 2 nurses, right? Well insured, one is in network, one's out of network, same age, same health issues. there are no two patients that are the exact same end billing value. And on the marketing side, there are no two patients that are the exact same cost per acquisition, right? There are different volumes of human beings searching for treatment every single month. So keep that in mind, right? We're getting the same questions from different perspectives and trying to connect those data sets. But you really do need to let your partners talk through these things to give you good advice.
The one other, before we move on to this next question, which is like a key question, I do just want to quickly say about the in-network contracting thing. Dan's example was a really good one about how, you might think that you're better off targeting the high-paying out-of-network patients, whereas if you go in-network, you might have a higher conversion rate and therefore lower CPA, and that will offset the lower rates from the in-network contracts. The same is also true in reverse. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. A lot of people come and ask both of us, Dan and I, separately, should I be in network or out of network? And the answer is always, it depends. We've seen plenty of situations where, people who are, have a, high-end luxury out-of-network facility and a clientele want to go in network for some reason. And when you run the numbers, it actually turns out the opposite is true. They are able to fill their facility at a reasonable CPA and make good margins on the out-of-network business. And if they were to try to convert to in-network, they're basically going to undermine their whole business model. So I just want to make sure that we don't leave people with the impression in-network is always better. Definitely not the case. And that's why it's so important for Dan and I to communicate in a situation like that. If you're evaluating that question, both sides of the equation need to be taken into account, because the answer is going to depend on what the specifics of the marketing side and the billing side really look like.
Yeah, your volumes will be impacted tremendously, shifting in either direction, and your margins will be impacted tremendously. We did have a question, Greg, specific to California. Off the top of your head, right, as we're talking about the questions we get asked all the time, do you know offhand who your best payers in California are at the moment?
Well, the short answer to that question is all of them. Really, relative to most of the rest of the country, the California payers are pretty favorable. We get good rates from Anthem. We get good rates from United when they pay. The problem that we're seeing with United recently is that they're finding increasing numbers and increasingly elaborate excuses not to pay. We've always had this issue where United, more than most other payers, will request medical records seemingly arbitrarily before they pay claims. We're now actually beginning to have an issue. We've seen this a few times in a few different facilities, not just in California, by the way, in other states as well, where they are requesting medical records before even providing an authorization. So even earlier in the process, while the patient's still in treatment, they're giving us a hard time. So I would say United is increasingly challenging. The one in California that's really always been a challenge is Blue Shield of California. So California is one of the only states, maybe the only state left, where Blue Cross and Blue Shield are not the same company. So that's a really important fact. And especially if you're taking out of state Blue Cross Blue Shield policies in California, it's really important to understand whether they process through Blue Shield or Anthem Blue Cross, because you're going to get very different results from one or the other of those.
From a marketing side, just to throw a little wrench in the works here, there is business risk in trying to target the best payer. Let me give an example. HealthNet a few years ago froze all payment in the entire state of California, right? And so they were a huge volume payer, decent policies in most cases. Cigna removed itself from the state of Florida, right? From the whole exchange, right? So you might have a best payer and you're targeting them on your marketing effectively and you're getting paid like clockwork. And all of a sudden you're stuck in prepayment review and you do not have diverse revenue streams and they completely withdraw from your state, right? And you get left with a whole other series of business risk issues. So yes, you can target those best payers in your marketing, but I will also advise diverse payer mix is always going to be best. Even diverse levels of care, you might want to go in network with specific payers, right? Based on your state or region and the employers there, and stay out of network with others. So it is really a tactical risk and reward scenario. And again, the marketing and the billing are completely intertwined on that. Greg can answer your question. Hey, Anthem, that's the best. And I would say, and you certainly don't want to limit yourself to only Anthem patients, right?
Right. 100% agree, Dan. And I think the other thing I'll just say in response to that is we've got a ton of data on this question. We can dig into, again, as I mentioned before, home plans and all kinds of different ways to slice and dice this. So Jerry, feel free to reach out to me directly after this call, and we can set up a time to talk through this question in a little more detail.
Yeah, and I will ask you a question that we commonly get asked, and it's on our screen right now, Greg. But Greg, how will I know what my cash flow is going to be for the next 6 months? And let me word it the way a treatment center owner would word it. Exactly how much money is going to be in my wallet in the next 180 days, Greg? And guarantee that for me.
Well, I'll go even further to say, oftentimes the way we get this question, especially from people who are looking to start working with us, is how am I going to make payroll next week? It can be that critical. And the thing that I always say about this, is sort of two things, right? We are big advocates of forecasting and cash flow management tools. And we are big advocates for this, both in the billing and collection side, like on the revenue cycle management. We have tools that will basically allow us to project based on what we've billed in the past, when and how much of that cash is going to come in, over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, in that future period. And then we also very much advocate for folks, and this is something that we help our clients with as well, to develop what we call, it's a commonly used, sort of business management tool called a 13-week cash flow. And that really is looking at the next quarter of the year, expenses and revenue, how much are your inflows and your outflows? What are the big items? Being able to, make those projections and time the bank to make sure that you have everything covered. So both of those analyses, right, depend upon, taking past performance and using that to predict with a reasonable degree of accuracy what's going to happen in the future. And so we can do that based on the past performance, right? We can look at the bills that we have submitted, the bills that we've sent out to the insurance companies over the last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and we can project based on those how much cash are we going to collect over the next coming period. But what we can't do is predict how much are we going to be billing next week? How much are we going to be billing next month? And that's a huge part of this equation that we need Dan's help with.
And here's how I answer that. I get told by clients all the time a few things. Seasonality doesn't exist, right? As soon as I start spending $1 on Google Ads, I expect it to perform at the exact same level of efficiency month over month. And those things are simply wrong, okay? Holiday seasons, you will get fewer admissions. So you might have an amazing first 5 months, 6 months of the year, and it does run like clockwork, and you're getting paid on every policy. And then summer vacation hits and the school year ends. And everything is unpredictable. You're not getting paid by anybody. You're not getting any deductibles because someone didn't actually, see their family and have an intervention until they were gone on vacation. So they spent all their money. Everything changes at certain points in the year, right? Calendar year, just total coverage. Anybody you don't get in by December 31st, brand new co-pays and deductibles on January 1st. So a lot of the information that we're running with, our data set is completely different. We are looking at seasonality. We are looking at cost of Google Ads. We're looking at organic SEO. Certain times of year, you will get more college age and young professional age people searching. At other times of year, right, the New Year's resolution crowd tends to be in older 40s and 50s, primarily male audience, primarily alcohol, right? It's predictable. And so day after Halloween, mostly narcotics, mostly young adults. Day after Thanksgiving, mostly male adults. So some of these trends, we can let you know what to expect, but the fun data point that we always have to address, right? If you get 300 calls through your website this month and 300 calls through your website next month, right? That's neither an increase nor a decrease. But actually, it's 600 people, right? That would be 300 individuals last month and 300 completely different individuals this month. The interesting point on that is they'll have a totally different insurance mix. You might have gotten 10, 20, 30 admissions on the 300 calls last month and only 5 this month. We have to ask Greg why, right? I did the exact same thing last month as I did this month. We changed very little, if anything at all. Same volume, and the qualifications completely changed. What happened?
Right. And, to take your example of the calendar year changeover, that's a great possibility, right? You could ask yourself the question, well, maybe all of this is, maybe you're having a lot fewer admissions because people are not financially qualified because they've got a $10,000 deductible that, last month was fully met, and this month you got to start from zero. And if you're asking somebody to write a $10,000 check, it's a lot harder to get them to show up at treatment than if your, deductible is fully met and they're going to have no patient responsibility. So there's very often the reasons why Dan's, as Dan just said, he if you're doing the same thing and you're getting different results on the marketing side, very often the reason for that is going to have something to do with the billing.
Yep. So how does your census look? Okay. And we get very inconcrete answers on this, right? Non-committal answers most of the time. And it's not that you don't know. It's that this is an open-ended question, right? Is it a high volume of low pay policies? Do you have a very low census, but you're running at super high margins? And do you evaluate your profitability like a hospital would, where once you hit a certain bed count, everything beyond that is pure profit because you're staffed to that level? Or do you try to run margins on a patient by patient basis? So this is a simple question, right? How does your census look? What should I expect to be paid on that census? And there are no 2 months where the answer will be the same. So from a marketing perspective, we approach this in broad generalizations, right? This is the one question we cannot answer, right? Well, we didn't change anything from last month to this month. If it's up, wonderful. I'm not going to use the word luck, right? But it may not be anything tactical. And if it goes down, again, we might have gotten you just as many or even more calls, and the qualifications change, the insurance change, where we went from November into December and the holiday season got worse. Or it's February, it's a short month, but it's in a year where there's like 4 weekends in February and there's only really 20 weekdays. And that's when you're going to get most of your inquiries. So think about those trends. It's just kind of retail marketing trends or how we inspect census. But that same question to Greg, right? What do you say when your clients are asking you about census levels?
Well, when I say, one of the things that I always like to talk about is basically like, this is a question that requires you to understand the intersection of a whole bunch of different factors, right? So very often this question will come to us in the form of, hey, like our admissions are way up. How come our billing is flat? Or vice versa sometimes, right? Like we seem to have fewer people in the facility, but we're making more money. How can that be true? And the answer is like, okay, well, the first thing that we want to look at is, how are those admissions turning into billable days, right? So maybe your length of stay is a factor. Maybe that length of stay is related to the type of clinical profile that you're bringing in. Maybe that length of stay is related to the quality of the documentation that's being provided by the clinical team. Maybe the length of stay is related to the payer mix. You have some payers who are a lot tougher on length of stay than others. Maybe that length of stay is related to the quality of the UR calls themselves. So the first question is, okay, my admissions team is doing great. My admissions are up, but the census is flat. Why? Well, let's look at length of stay and understand how many days of real treatment and billing are those admissions turning into. And then the sort of next piece of the question is, I guess I forgot about AMAs. That's a whole other factor that could impact your length of stay. So then the next piece of the question is the census turning into revenue, right? Like, how does your census look? Well, the number of people in treatment might be the same, but your revenue might be way up or way down. And that's going to depend on what's your level of care mix look like. Are you billing a lot more detoxes and a lot fewer PHPs? If you have the same number of people in treatment but more detox and less PHP, that's going to be more revenue for you. On the other hand, if you are, if you're estimating, if you're looking at estimated, net revenue, that's what we always look at. We're not that interested in the gross charge amounts. We want to know how much cash is this patient or this claim going to produce for you. When you bill Blue Cross Blue Shield, you might be expecting a very different rate than when you're billing United or Cigna or Aetna or a local payer, Tufts or Kaiser. So that can also massively impact your revenue, even if the census is the same, what your payer mix looks like.
You can also give really bad insights to your marketing group, right? So the day we onboard a new client, hey, where do you get most of your patients from? Oh, it's mostly Blue Cross, mostly out of network. Okay, great. That's wonderful to know. That's where most of your admissions come from. However, without the analysis Greg just described, we are going to go all in, right? In a marketing perspective, I'm going to get you as many new Blue Cross out of network admissions as I can possibly get you, because that's what you told me you wanted. And if they're all walking out AMA after 6 days, right? And you're not actually getting paid, and length of stay for this high volume of Blue Cross admissions is 20% lower than it is for Aetna, you gave me bad market intel. I might even have another client in a comparable market that is getting a full length of stay, right? And they're getting paid wonderfully. And so again, I even have data that validates the input you gave me, but your clinical has some kind of an operating deficiency that's hurting your revenue. So this data, right, that analysis coming back to your marketing side of the house, that helps us get you the volumes you're looking for. As it passes through the clinical process, the real affirmation on how good your clinical is your billable days. And that one piece of data, right, which policies are getting you the most billable days and the most dollars per day and the fewest AMAs, that is useful in our marketing because we can target the patients that you're best suited to treat that pay the most for your model.
Right. And I think from my point of view, this is just an unbelievably important point. And we sort of like to, it goes back to the KPI comment that I made before that Aaron always makes. We like to distill things down to the simplest possible level, right? We want to have a number. And if the number goes up, that's good. And if the number goes down, that's bad. And if there's anything that I learned from my time working in-house, with a national behavioral healthcare company and running their sort of strategy and analytics department, what I learned was that these simple numbers are overly simple, that you can't really, the business is too complicated to tell what you need to tell about the health of the business and even the health of a department, the health of a particular function from any one particular number in isolation. So, to use the example that's on this slide, right? I'm getting a ton of calls. Usually from a marketing point of view, more calls equals better, right? But that's not, in fact, always the case for your business for exactly the reasons that Dan was just talking about. Your census might not actually benefit from having more calls. Why? Well, maybe you have a bunch of AMAs. Maybe you're getting people who don't fit the clinical profile for a long length of stay. Maybe you're getting people who are from a payer that is just refusing to authorize. I was talking about the United issues that we're having before on the UR front, for example. So that's that's an illustration of, okay, more calls equals good, except when blah blah blah, right? So now we focus on census. Okay, well, is census the metric? More census equals good, right? Well, not always, right? Sometimes more census equals less revenue. Why would more census equal less revenue? Well, maybe the payer mix has something to do with it. Maybe the level of care mix has something to do with it. So ultimately, this is just another illustration of why it's so important for all of these data points and all of these departments within your organization or your partners outside the organization to be working together. Because ultimately, the left hand might think that they're succeeding because the one number that's a simple measure of Dan's success is going up. But the right hand can tell you, well, actually, that may look good for the left hand, but it's not really good for your business. And you need both.
The volumes there get really interesting too. So let's say it's COVID and you're super clever and you deploy telehealth, right? Either your private practice is temporarily closed and you've got a pretty good patient base, and you're going to bill telehealth, or you're PHP IOP, and you're like, you know what? With telehealth, I can take on infinity patients, right, locally, and I'll do my marketing to them, right? So we got a ton of requests from 1 million people that all thought they were the only person that came up with the idea to use telehealth during COVID. And then we get asked all the time, side by side with that, for more calls, right? Well, if I close 1 in 10 calls, I just need 100 more calls. Okay, but not if they're coming from keywords like free or affordable or clinic. Not if you're targeting luxury, right? You need to refine your calls. The perfect ratio is 1 call, 1 admission, okay? Acute medical treatment shouldn't really be a call center kind of a function. That's how you sell mortgages and life insurance and such. If you were calling for diabetes care, would you expect to be a 1% conversion in a national call center? If you're calling for cancer treatment, would you be playing the volume game? Or would you want to go to the best possible cancer treatment provider for your exact case and condition, no matter where they are? So the targeting, that refinement versus volume, is one consideration. And then innovation and general market approach, this telehealth issue, is another one. I might succeed for you in tremendous volumes, as we did experience last year, at delivering telehealth inquiries. But on the billing side, you are going to make fractions of what you would make at any other level of care. So yeah, you'll get paid, right? And if you're closed, if it's private practice, at least you're making revenue versus no revenue. But unless it's an additional revenue stream, right, a diversification, you're risking getting a higher paying level of care and a stronger diagnosis. You're risking that revenue. And the only way for us to confirm that is with the billing group, right? Hey, we're crushing it. We got 1,000 more phone calls, very few of them converted, but we're getting tons of telehealth, so that's good. And that's where Greg can say, it's terrible. You just turned, what could have been 100 grand off of 4 residential patients. You just turned it into about 12 grand because they're just doing telehealth.
Right. It's the old price versus margin discussion. It's the, are you better off with a lower number of higher value patients, or or a larger number of lower value patients? And that's a business plan discussion that that you need to be having with both of us, and or whoever it is that's in our shoes for your team. And this is just another example of the telehealth type of situation here. Is this example that we included is about opiates versus alcohol, because for us on the billing side, one of the things, and really on the utilization review side, one of the things that's really striking is the ways in which payers treat different types of addiction differently from the authorization point of view. So, for example, with respect to opiates, it's a lot harder to get detox level of care authorized for somebody coming in with a primary diagnosis of opioid addiction, for example, than it is with somebody coming in with a primary diagnosis of alcohol addiction. And so if you are setting yourself up with a business model as a detox, or where you're depending on that detox level of care to make your business model work, but Dan may be producing a ton of calls and they may be converting left, right, and center, but if they're all opioids, then you're going to have a really hard time getting authorization for that level of care that you really need in order to make your business plan work.
Or co-occurring disorders and dual diagnosis. If you're getting mental health primary, which is the largest increase in inquiries we've seen since COVID began, right? 1 in 4 Americans right now is medically diagnosed with a mental health condition, right? Tons of anxiety, tons of depression, mostly first-time inquiries, about 31% increase in first-time inquiries for mental health diagnosis. I think that what you need to realize is we could succeed in hitting the market you think you want, but it's not the market that's going to produce the strongest revenues for you or even be the best clinical match for you, right? Alcohol is still the #1 substance being abused in America. Heroin is the one that's killing the most people, right? Immediately, overdose. So you might be looking at the CDC data and your detox license and thinking there's your business model, right? when in fact there is 5 times the volume of alcoholics looking for help in your very town. And so that's where our data, like our geographic marketplace data and the search volumes on Google, those will be indicators to us. And then you can cross-reference that data with substance and payers. And that's where your billing group and your marketing group become strategic, and you'll make fewer mistakes and waste fewer dollars. And we'll cruise through a couple of these so that we can let you guys know the results of the polls and answer some questions. But, you know, how do I know if my marketing is working? How do I know if my billing is working? This is my favorite part. Ask the other guy, right? If you want to know if your marketing is working, ask Greg. If you want to know if your billing is working, ask me. And it's interesting because it's not just to keep each other honest. We want the data the other guy has to work with. It makes us both better at our jobs, but it will directly allow us to advise you on the effectiveness of the other party, right? Or your in-house billing, or whether you're using the right VOB software, or whether it's a human issue or a software issue, right? So how do I know if my marketing is working? Greg, I don't know. How will they know?
You ask me.
So you'll be making more money, right? The targeting is on point. The payers are on point. It's tangible in revenue, right? And margin. And then if you want to know if your billing is working, right, they'll be able to give us insights that continue to improve the marketing. And often those interests would be aligned, right? The more you grow, the more opportunity your billing partners have to grow. So it's a win-win for them to be accurate and you know, generally heading in the right direction on trends with that advice.
Well, and ultimately, I mean, you can, I think the next slide is actually a really good illustration of the point that I'm about to make. It occurs to me that, you know, ultimately what you may think that you're hiring Dan to produce calls, and you may think that you're hiring me to, you know, bill the insurance company. But ultimately what you're doing for both of us, when you hire a billing company or a billing, you know, person in-house, and the same thing with the marketing side, ultimately what you're doing is you're hiring somebody to improve, to help you grow your business, right? Our ultimate KPI, I always say this about the billing side because it's sort of obvious, but our KPI is cash, right? But ultimately the KPI for both of us, for me and for Dan and for the people, you know, all over the country in our shoes, is your business succeeding, right? Are you growing? Are you profitable? And, you know, that's because that's the same, you know, objective, the same benchmark for both of us. You know, we're working together. Working together helps us both achieve that for you more effectively.
Yep. Now, interesting scenario, right? What is the actual machine? What is your actual operation? What are the variables where marketing crosses over with billing? I joke about it a little bit, right? ROI, because what you do tends to be expensive, there can be tremendous ROI on your marketing dollars, right? If you're private practice, you put a few $1,000s a month in, that would be way more than any other practice in town, and you can generate tens of thousands in new patient billables. If you were a treatment center with 120 beds, comparably, you can spend 10, 20, 50 grand a month, 300 grand a month, and it scales. And so it would be like if you had an ATM machine in your office, and every time you put $1 in, $7 to $12 comes back out. But you need to understand what's happening inside the machine. So we're running with the slot machine analysis, or metaphor here, I guess. There's utilization review, right? So a lead is generated, and you need to know if that's a good fit for your clinical. That is the most probability of getting dollars out of that machine, that you have a strong alcohol treatment program, and this is someone inquiring about their alcohol addiction, and that's good, so you get them in. We look at census levels, right? This is, you know, average days, right? This is your AMA rate. Your business model, should you be IOP PHP? Should you be residential? Detox? Yes, no? So you'll get that data from your census, from your marketing, from your billing. Is your location good, right? Oh, we have this incredible campus out in the middle of nowhere, and it's great because we have a low AMA rate, right? There's nowhere to go if you walk out in the middle of the desert. Okay, but then you're not near any population center, and so you're never going to get high volumes of in-network. So that's no longer an option for your business model. Weigh in on that one, Greg, right? So we often get asked to scout locations. What's the best location for marketing? What's the best state for payers? How do you address that?
Well, look, I mean, we definitely, what's the best state for payers is an important question. I sort of, mentioned before, California is a very good state for payers, but on the other hand, there's a lot of competition in California, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into that, and definitely one of the things that we always focus on is, okay, there may be. I always like to talk about the, sort of the upper Midwest, right? The industrial heartland of the country. That's a very particular type of population. There's a lot of unionized workers in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana. There's a lot of people who work or used to work in industrial fields, which are hard on their bodies. There's family values very strong in that part of the country. So there's a certain profile of people in that part of the country, and obviously some of that is going to influence how you market to those people. And some of that is going to influence what type of insurance they're likely to have or what type of ability to pay they're likely to have. And then when you take those factors together and you think about, okay, who am I as a clinician, or who am I as a treatment center owner? What is my program going to be like? Is it going to suit that population of people? Ultimately, that's what makes the fit for a location.
And if you're looking at the business of behavioral health, right? I mean, we're talking about these populations and their interest in transacting, right? But these are the variables on your screen, right? That matter, right? From the marketing side, we can always address call volumes, call mix, right? How many of your calls are qualified versus Medicaid? Do you want Medicaid? But it really will come down to, the quality of your program as well. So I can market enough to get patients to show up, right? And Greg can bill strong enough to get you paid if they stay. But there are other factors that you need to look at operationally, like quality of clinicians. Very quickly, right? Why should your marketing and billing people get along? Here's the interesting thing. We were looking for a good metaphor here, right? Some good symbolism, right? At different stages in your business cycle, either one of our companies will be the jet fuel, okay? So your marketing might be the fuel that gets your billing engine started, right? And then Greg's team just runs with it. And you're getting paid really well all the time. And then sometimes we need the data from them as fuel to make your marketing better and your spend more efficient. And so we realize that it's actually cyclical. We're each the jet at different times where we propel your business forward, and we're each the source of fuel when we're providing data for the other partner. And so we just wanted to give you guys that visual, that concept that different stages in your business cycle are going to require different data sets as fuel versus progression. We need your permission, okay? Synergy, all right? We can't just talk to each other about your financial proprietary information or your marketing proprietary information. Those are both closely held secrets. Those are both internal intellectual property, right, for our organizations and for yours. So your recipe for collections, your recipe for bringing on new patients and VOBs, the tools you use, that's not being broadcast. We're not telling people your secrets, but also we don't even know when you're working with both of us. So one key takeaway from today: go tell your billing department or your billing software company that's doing your VOBs, or your billing company, to talk to your marketing group, internal, external, doesn't matter. And in writing, give them authorization to speak to each other, and just clarify whether or not you need to be on the phone while that happens, or whether they can speak once a month. That's about all it takes. Looking at the poll data, just to give you guys some confirmations, about 45% of our audience answered. 60% of you are marketing executives. The rest of you are finance and operations side. And you currently have your billing company speaking with your marketing people. 67% of you do not, and 33% of you said kind of. None of you currently have your billing company speaking with your marketing people, right? So makes sense why you're here. Thank you. But you should very much prioritize that. There's only really advantage to you in that. And then the breakdown of what fields or disciplines you work in. 36% of you are marketing disciplined. 18% of you said you're billing specifically. 27% said general operations, and 18% said none of the above. It's interesting because it means that both sides of the house have interest in this topic, right? For those of you that are marketers like me, you want to know all this great billing data Greg has. For those of you that are Greg, you want to know where's all this revenue coming from? Who the hell's generating all these Aetna policies?
Well, and how can we get you to do more of it?
Yep. And the alignment is interesting. We are completely aligned. Our goals and our revenues are both attached to the same KPIs on the treatment side, right? So sharing that data is obvious to us. Giving you one quick case study. This is a client that Greg and I both work with that did not allow us to speak to each other for years. And we accidentally, when they were expanding, looking for an additional location, both of us were describing the same person to each other, asking if we knew of any locations in the same state. And so when we started cross-referencing data, this is a rural market, right? In the Midwest, so a good in-network kind of a market, looking for steady and stable growth, not overly aggressive on marketing, not crazy ambitious on dollars, just looking to build a good and steady growth business. Dreamscape and Prosperity jointly recognized Blue Cross was the answer to this business model, right? This state is all Blue Cross all day, every day. And so we said, you know what? Let's go heavy on the detox. If it's all Blue Cross and it's all the same to you, detox, right? We weren't getting a strong feedback of whether the detox patients were staying for additional levels of care, PHP, IOP, residential afterwards, until we connected with Prosperity. And then we start getting average length of stay, dollars per day, how long someone would step down through different levels of care. And all of a sudden there's substantial growth, right, in accurate web traffic, in phone call volumes, and thus in revenue. So direct growth, 30% growth from opening the lines of communication there and bringing on an additional location. Okay. So this data gave enough insight to say, oh, well, I guess now we're scalable. Let's do it again. So billing and marketing can forge a very successful partnership in volume. Neither budget was changed, right? There wasn't an increase in marketing spend. There wasn't a change in fees for billing. It was very interesting to see that the cost stayed flat, right? Very predictable, very linear. But with this sharing of data after several years of already, progressing on our own, there was a notable sharp increase in a very short period of time, about 3 to 6 months, towards the right side of all the lines on your screen. So whether this is completely internal, no matter who you're working with, it's not unique just to Dreamscape and Prosperity. This is what happens when you start pairing your billing data and your marketing data. Anything to add to that, Greg?
No, just to emphasize that obviously, Dan, I think you're great at what you do, and I hope that you think the same about me. But it really is not about Greg and Dan or Prosperity and Dreamscape. This is about, connecting whoever it is, internal, external, that is doing, that's serving these functions, that is collecting this data, and not, inviting those people, demanding that those people talk to each other and integrate. Because as you can say, Dan, I think these lines on this page speak for themselves. Up and to the right is always what you want to see.
Yep. And our last slide of the day, again, sorry for our faces. There's nothing we can do about that. But, what you should take away from today, right? You win when we talk. Get your accountants and get your madmen advertisers together and start analyzing that data together. And what you're also going to find is then you don't have to do it, right? Stop doing your own analysis. Let everyone else take care of that for you from both financial and marketing side of the house, right? If front end and back end data are being shared in a loop, you're just going to get the insights that result from it. And they're going to be way more accurate and way more valuable than you trying to do that on your own at 1 a.m. or whenever you get to those numbers. Any final takeaways, Greg, that I'm not mentioning here?
No, I don't think so. Just to want to say thank you to BHAP for having us. Thank you, Dan, for being such a entertaining, enjoyable co-host. Thank you, Angie, for coordinating everything. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And, looking forward to the next conversation.
Synergy.
First of all, neither of you have a cat filter.
I'm prepared to move forward with the legal case, even though I look like
I know we're out of time, but I also know that the person who asked this question is still in the room, so I figured I would approach it. Peter was hoping you could expand on how merging payment data with marketing data can also allow centers to understand the profit of each policy. I know you kind of touched on that, but I didn't know if there was anything in there in that question that you hadn't hit.
Sure.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. I would just say that, from my point of view, the way we think about financial analysis for treatment centers, for example, when we do, M&A due diligence for buyers of treatment centers, we really think about this in three pieces, right? We think about the revenue part of the equation, we think about the cost to treat part of the equation, and then we think about the cost of acquisition part of the equation. And ultimately, you got to understand those three pieces in order to break down the profitability of each policy. So it comes back to, first of all, the billing data is going to help you understand the revenue potential. So if you got Cigna coming in and that patient is going to admit to the detox level of care, you can have a pretty good idea from your billing data what the length of stay is going to be, what the revenue per day at each level of care is going to be, and therefore what your total revenue opportunity from that patient looks like. Then, you have the middle section, which is the cost to treat, which is something that you definitely need to sort of be analyzing and understanding for your business specifically, because that is something that is very business specific. That's not payer specific. You can't generalize that to a state. That's, how is your facility operating? So you got to understand the therapy hours. You got to understand the dietary costs. You got to understand, the activities. Are you taking people out on excursions? Are you, doing art therapy? All of that stuff. You got to understand how much it costs at each level of care to treat a patient. And then you can figure out what your gross margin is on that patient, right? So revenue minus cost to treat is going to give you your gross margin. And you can drill that down to each level of care. So your detox days are going to give you a different gross margin than your residential days or your IOP days. And then obviously Dan's data is the key piece of the last part of that, which is the cost of acquisition.
Yeah, and I would say those KPIs, the cost of acquisition, briefly paired with average length of stay and paired with your AMA rate. That's the key data I think would start off pairing your billing and your marketing. And again, thank you to BHAP and thank you all for coming today. We appreciate the time.
Okay, well, thank both of you for presenting
everyone.
today. Thanks as well for participating. With that, we hope you join us for future BHAP webinars. You can sign up for our various newsletters, which include emails specific to upcoming events at our website, www.bhap.us. With this concludes today's webinar. Thanks again.